Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian J. Villip. We're from Audio Excellence in Canada. And today we wanted to talk about used equipment. Why buy used? Obviously, you can always buy new, but one of the options, of course, is to look at what used equipment can bring you as an alternative. So why don't we start with Villip? Villip, over the years, you've bought a lot of used equipment. You're known as an audio
not guilty
hoarder.
as charged. I'm not guilty as charged.
You're known as an audio hoarder.
Have you been to his place?
No, and I don't want to. I'm afraid that I'll never get out.
It's not that bad.
It's terrible. It's crazy in there.
Okay, so Villip, why don't you start? What are the pros of buying used equipment?
Well, you save 50 cents on the dollar at least, usually.
Sometimes, yeah. Mhm.
Or you can get stuff that, well, you normally might not be able to get, in like new because it's old.
So things like classic products, vintage products.
Yeah, Macintosh, Altec, JBL, Tannoy, Wilson.
Joking.
Just joking. An old pair of Watt puppies or something like that. Those are fairly reasonable. It's an easy way of getting into the hobby
Okay,
or into the passion. Or
sure. Jay?
Well, I agree. It's a very easy way to get into this hobby. I mean, when I first started working at the store, I was like, how am I going to afford all these things? And then he introduced me to all these used gear, and they were affordable. And some of the stuff, like he said, Tannoy, these are very interesting designs. And I learned a lot of the original speaker designs and stuff like that from using these vintage pieces. So certainly value there.
So, quick summary. You can typically buy used equipment for anywhere from 40 to 50% off normal selling prices. It's depreciated, obviously. You get more for your money. So if your budget is, let's say, $2,000, oftentimes buying a new one might get you a certain quality, but a used one might have been $4,000. So you can get a lot more for your money. The other thing that they haven't mentioned is if you ever decided to resell, you will lose much less, right? So that's one advantage. So for example, if you bought it for $2,000, kept it for a year, you could sell it and sometimes even make some money if you bought right. Or if you decided that you don't want it anymore and you bought wrong, well, you might be able to sell it for $1,500 or $1,000. So it's still a lot less of a loss than if you had bought it new. So those are some advantages to buying used. And then one other thing is you get to try a lot of different things. I know that Jay went through that when he first started. He went mad and started to buy all kinds of stuff, kept it for a little bit, resell it, buy something else, and this way it gives you the opportunity to try a lot of different things within a short period of time, and again, not lose a lot of money.
But there are certainly caveats.
Right, and we'll get to that in a second. So those are some reasons to buy to buy used. What are some of the cons, some negatives? So, Philip?
well, I recently bought a very expensive, originally Meridian. It's a DVD transport. It's like around $8,000 new, and I bought it for a fraction of that price. And it worked for one day. And
Speak up a little bit.
it worked for one day, and to this day now, I only bought it a few months ago. It's still not working. I can't get my money back because of the deal I arranged. It was through another person. So I got a great deal, and there's a reason why I got a great deal, because it doesn't work. And it worked when I originally hooked it up. So it seemed fine. I said nothing, and then it was too late.
Okay.
So you got to be very careful about that.
Right.
Yeah, so there are risks, right? Warranty is one. You may not get the warranty. Some manufacturers don't allow transferable warranty. The warranty could be 2 years, and you bought it when the warranty period is over, and you can run into problems like shipping. Recently, I shipped out a speaker. It was damaged. Now I'm going through insurance. So there's a lot of factors that it's a headache when you deal with used stuff. There's also, you get it for a good price, but you also have to deal with be prepared to deal with the risks.
There's always costs.
There's always costs. Yeah, nothing is free.
Let's be more specific. What products would you feel comfortable buying used? Let's say, not products as in brands, but in terms of the type, the genre. Let's say amps, preamps, things like that. What would you be comfortable buying used?
Speakers.
Speakers, okay. Why?
Because I can actually test them.
Okay.
At the person's place, and I can check the surrounds, the condition. It's more likely that it's not defective if you listen to it and can tell the surrounds and drivers are all in good condition. Whereas an amplifier, you can't open it up in most cases. Certainly you can listen to it, but I had cases where I listened to it, brought it home, and it didn't work, and it was water damaged. So it was working perfectly at the person's place. And I bought a Sensui AU17, drove all the way to Waterloo in the rain, right? I found it for a really good deal, drove all the way to Waterloo, went down to this guy's place. She was a hoarder too. And he had like Pioneer, Sensui, and a bunch of stuff. And so I went down there and, he played it for me and he was cranking it up and it sounded good. It sounded perfectly fine. It was not the ideal setup, but it sounded fine. So I brought it home and then I hooked it up and it was crackling. So I texted him and no response, of course. Took it to a technician and he tells me, it's been water damaged. There's no restoration for this one. So.
Okay. At another time, just so you guys know, we'll go into strategies about how to buy used. For now, we'll just stick to the macro.
The horror stories.
What type of product would you be comfortable buying used?
I have no problems buying used, and because I did it for 30 years. So, again, you just gotta be a little bit careful. I think most people out there are very, very honest, and they want to share their enthusiasm and their knowledge and their passion with you. And it's a great way of actually meeting lots of other like-minded people. And it's always been a very positive experience. I can count on one hand the number of times I've had some hiccups. I just illustrated one of those, but for the most part, I have no problems, and I've had things shipped to me from all over the world. You will find something wrong if you look. Understand that it's a used piece of gear, and whatever issues with it, most of them are fixable. Unless you buy something like J, then it's not fixable. But for the most part.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to be aware. I typically recommend to be careful of mechanical products. So things like CD player, DVD players, even turntables, because there's a motor, cassette decks, reel-to-reels, cartridges. Quick story, just when I was starting out, so when I was in my early 20s, back then there was a newsletter that you could subscribe to, and people would advertise it primarily in North America. And there was a guy who advertised that he had a Koetsu, I'm trying to remember what it was now, and it was half the price. And back then it was impossible to find things at half price, and here it was. So I told him I'd buy it, but I hadn't sent the money, and he sent me the cartridge. And it wasn't working. I called him up. We agreed that I would send it back. Thank God, because otherwise it would have been $1,500, which I could barely afford. So just be careful with things like cartridges. You can't really tell if there's a problem with the internal suspension. If you don't have a good microscope, you might not be able to tell about the wear of the diamond, things like that. What other cons can you guys think of? Just so you know, by the way, none of this is scripted. I come up with some topics, some notes, and I let the guys talk. This way, they can say whatever they want, and you get the benefit of their experience.
Well, so I bought a Monster power conditioner one time, and the guy swore I was working. I bought it on eBay, and the price was fairly reasonable. He sent it to me, and it didn't work. And I asked him, well, what's going on here? I want my money back. He said, no. And I said, well, I'm going to send you, I'm going to write a bad review. And he eventually gave me back a little bit of money, which I used to have it fixed. And I found out that it had gone through a massive surge at some point before. And it, basically the elements that were, the protection elements were gone. And so I had them all replaced. Now, it ended up costing me a little bit of money, but, this is the thing when you buy used gear. These kinds of things happen. And they will tell you when you buy online, and if you buy through something like eBay, there's very little recourse that you can do, especially if it's from the States and you're in Canada, then it's especially hard with the border. And I've had all sorts of people tell me things, oh, for the age of it, it's in great condition, but you described it as a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. I bought a pair of speakers. There was water damage on it. On the top of it, you could see it. And he says, well, it's 40 years old. So that's in great shape. So
is the title of this video why buy used or why not buy used? Might as well title it the horror stories of audio.
We can go in any direction you want because there are a lot,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of horror stories though when you deal with, used stuff. You can go on for days, but weren't you gonna recommend like some amplifiers or something?
Yeah, at the end. So, do you have a horror story you want to tell?
I mean, one. Okay. So I bought a 300B tube amplifier, and I think Philip knows because I was angry. And was it Emission Labs, the 300B tubes?
Yeah.
So I bought a 300B amplifier, Golden Audio or something like that. Golden tube, and it was like 8 watts per channel. I was driving it, trying it out with my JBL L300s, which are very efficient speakers. And so I was trying it out. It sounded great, but I wanted to try something a little bit more exotic with the tubes. So I searched up Emission Labs, and they make great tubes. Of course, it is not affordable. It was more expensive than the amplifier itself. And I saw the used market. This guy was selling tubes. So the first tube purchase, and Philip had warned me, be careful when you buy tubes. This guy had one review. But I pulled the plug, I sent him the money, it arrived, and it was packaged well. So I plugged them in, and of course, no sound, only buzzing noises. So I text the guy is very helpful at first, and so he says, take it to a technician, get it tested, blah, blah, blah. I take it to Roger, our Macintosh technician. Say, can you test this?
Like you can fix tubes, right?
No, I was like, can you measure these for me? Because I don't know what was going on. I was, can you measure these for me? And he measures them. He calls me up and he says, yeah, these are toast. Like these were like gone the day of arrival. Like there's something rattling inside too. I don't know if you heard it. I'm like, oh God. So thank God I actually paid him through PayPal, and the guy was refusing to pay me back. So I sent the tubes back and went through PayPal and got my money back in the end, but it was a big headache. And I had to fix my tube amplifier because it fried my tube amplifier. And it cost me about like $500 to fix it. So
I've got a doozy. Years ago, I won't mention brands or anything like that. Years ago, we were selling this tube line, and it was particularly well known. You know what? I'm going to say the brand name. It was Sonic Frontiers, and at the time, Sonic Frontiers' main claim to fame was that it was a good design using really expensive, exotic audiophile quality parts, and I sold an amplifier to a gentleman who was 1 or 2 provinces away. Shipped it to him, and 2 days later he calls me up and he says, it's not working, I want my money back. I said, okay, ship it back. Ships it back, sent him his money, everything was done. And then 3-4 days later, somebody comes in, wants to hear it, plug it in, and there was this boom, really loud noise. And I thought, oh my God, thank God it's still under warranty. I sent it into the factory. They called me up and they said, what did you do to this amplifier? I said, nothing. We sold it to a guy. He sent it back to us. I plugged it in to demo it, and I heard this explosion. They said, all of the stuff that we put in, the audiophile quality stuff, has now been replaced by crap. I said, you're kidding me. When I went to pick up the amplifier, I mean, it was a disaster, a total write-off. So, although this is not used per se as a story, it illustrates how you have to be careful. There are unfortunately people who will take advantage of your trust, and so you need to be careful with who you deal with. As I said, in the future video, we're going to deal with some strategies that you can protect yourself.
Yeah, it's hard to find people who are scrupulous all the time.
Yeah. A couple other things to be aware of. If you have sold, or if you're thinking about selling on sites like Canadian Audio, Canuck Audio Mart, Kijiji, eBay, and so on, just be aware that you will get the low ballers. It comes with the territory. I generally just ignore them, say thank you very much, but not interested. Don't get freaked out. It happens.
Lowballing is the least of the concerns.
Yeah, and the other thing about lowballing is that a lot of times they'll lowball, and even if you decide you accept it, a lot of times you'll find that they'll just disappear and say, okay, thank you very much, and not even come back. So it can be a pain in the ass. The other thing to also be aware of is if you have somebody local who wants to come to your place, be careful. Certainly, I know of many instances where clients have sold things or attempted to sell things privately and found out shortly afterwards that they got burgled. So be careful. You're inviting strangers into your home. Again, another thing to be aware of. Okay, following that, I wanted the guys to give a suggestion of something that you could look into. So the topic now is best used power amplifier for under $1,000 Canadian. Philip, what do you recommend?
Adcom.
Adcom. Which one?
Any of the GFA 555, 545, 535. Those are all excellent.
By the way, not that we will say this, but Google GFA and what it stands for. It might be interesting.
It's a Nelson Pass design. It's basically, it was the NAD killer of its day because NAD was very popular at that time, and the Adcom was just really spectacular. And it's 40 years later on, and it's still just as good. It's one of my clients, Paul. He came to the store the other day and told me he bought a 545, and I said, yeah, it's probably like $300. He said, I paid $250 for it. It was brand new. And he went in and he changed some of the cabs and he did some upgrades, and it sounds beautiful.
Yeah. Jay?
I would recommend Sensui AU717. I really liked it. I eventually bought a one that was working perfectly, and I really liked it for a lengthy time. Also, Pioneer SX 1080 can be had for under $1,000 in some cases, a little bit more. But those two pieces are one of the pieces I ended up selling and regret selling. So
okay, my recommendation is the Aragon 4004. Google it. There should be some pretty decent information online. Apparently, it was designed by Dan D'Agostino of Krell. They use military grade parts. Dual mono construction, even to the power supply. So the two toroidal transformers, massive ones, rated at 200 into 8, 400 into 4, stable into 2 ohms. And even the cosmetic design is very unique. There's a V, which acts as a chimney for the heat sinks. So you could actually put something above the amplifier and it would still be okay. Balanced inputs, as well as RCA, of course. The other thing that's very interesting, I don't know how often you guys have done this, and certainly in the store we do it all the time. When we do connections, we often have to bend over something to connect. So when you're bending over, the script for the connections is right side up. So you're reading upside down, if that makes any sense. So for example, let's say you're connecting to input 1. You're looking upside down and it says input 1 and you're reading upside down. With Aragon, they had both right side up and upside down. So when you're bending over, you can actually read right side up, so to speak. Little things like this, but as in another video that we just uploaded about Sonus Faber, I love when companies think about little details like that, which really can help the end user. Still sounds great. After all these years, it's still a fantastic sounding amplifier. Reliable as all get out for the most part. In almost 30 years of being in this, of owning our own store, I've never seen one that needed to be repaired. It's not to say that it hasn't happened. I've never seen it. And we sold many, many, many of those amplifiers. The other thing I love about it, because of its ability to drive in low impedances, in those days, one of the more popular high-end speakers was the Apogee, the ribbon designs, and those things were really tough, very low sensitivity, 4-ohm loads, 3-ohm loads, and back then there weren't a lot of power amplifiers that could drive low impedance as well. Today it's relatively common, but back then it wasn't, and certainly not at that price point. The Aragon could do it, and so again, another reason I like it. So anyway, check out those suggestions, except for his. And,
don't I don't know.
And we'll see you again on another video. If you like this video, please subscribe, turn on the notification, and like it. Thanks very much. Bye.